Hey everybody, thanks so much for tuning in, and you picked the perfect episode to check us out because we're starting a brand new series called Behind My Journey. You are not going to listen to me, you're going to get to learn from the stories of some of the people who are a part of our church. And if you find this helpful, and I think you're going to love it, you might want to go to wherever you listen to podcasts and find our Behind My Journey podcast, because every month we release a couple episodes where you get to hear what God is doing in the lives of some of the people right here in our family and in our church movement. So I hope you're going to enjoy today. We're going to sit down with Peggy Higginson and learn what God's been doing in her life and how He's been teaching her to put her trust in Him even when things are challenging. Enjoy. Well, hey everybody, I am here with Peggy Higginson. Hey Peggy, thanks for doing this with us, first of all.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I want to go ahead and jump in and just give us a little bit of context. Okay. Tell us a little bit about your family and how y'all first got to Journey.
Okay. Well, my husband, William Higginson, and my daughters, Mia Oliver and Alexis Higginson, we all come here together. Our family is a blended family, so we also have, William has two older boys, but they are already out of the house with big boy jobs and families, and so, but when we first started coming to the Journey, William and I were just dating, and I was really a single mom coming with my daughter to a brand new place, and to be honest, I was a little bit of a helicopter mom, and was excited because William and I came from very different backgrounds as far as church and how we'd grown up, but Journey felt like a place where we could come together and we both could get something out of it. As far as dropping off my daughter in the nursery, I was really nervous because I had a new place, strange people, but I remember Sarah Martin was in the nursery and I gave her Mia and she was like, she'll be okay. And I was like, I don't know if I'm okay. I don't know if I'm going to be okay. And she was like, you'll be fine.
Mia's not the problem.
Yeah. And she was like, you'll be fine. And I promise if anything happens, we will come get you. We'll let you know. And so we started coming at that point and we've been here pretty much ever since.
So you mentioned that you and William came from different church experiences.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about your church experience growing up, what that was like.
Okay. I grew up in a larger church in Paducah, and really, I don't remember a time where I wasn't in church. Yeah. However, I do remember it feeling very much something I did rather than something that I was a part of, if that makes sense.
Sure.
I knew that we went to church on Sunday and we went to church on Wednesday, and when I got in the youth group, I went to whatever there was, and I was very grateful for those experiences.
Absolutely.
Some of my best friends I made during that period of time. But I remember as I was growing up, that became something I did rather than a part of who I was. And it wasn't until later on that I recognized the difference. I didn't even really notice the difference for a while.
You didn't know any different.
Right.
But it is a big distinction. So let's fast forward a little bit then, okay? So as you start to become an adult and you're getting to make your own choices about what you engage with and what you don't engage with, tell us a little bit about what your spiritual journey was like then and how your relationship with God has changed over time.
So I ended up moving to Murray, not right out of high school. I actually went to college somewhere else, and then I decided I didn't love that.
Sure.
As my mother then was right, but that's okay.
Yes.
And then I ended up in Murray later on, and honestly came to Murray to work and eventually go to Murray State, because I realized I was going to need to work while I was putting myself through school. And so I ended up in Murray, and I tried several different churches, but it was still something I knew I was supposed to do. It wasn't necessarily because I wanted to be connected.
It was just an obligation or responsibility.
Right, because that's what I'd always done. I didn't know any different. And
Yep.
so Sunday morning would roll around and I'm like, I'm supposed to be
Supposed to be at
somewhere,
church.
you know.
Mom's gonna ask.
Right. So in that process, I did end up finding a church that I went to for a period of time, but it still was, it was not until, oddly enough, I had my daughter, Mia, who she was born in 2007. And when she was born, I recognized that it was not really all about me. And I also understood the love that God had for me, because how much I loved this little bitty person already.
Would you say that was the first time that God's love for you became that personal to you?
Absolutely, yes. Because I recognized that this child that I had, I would do anything to protect her. I would do anything to take care of her. And I tried very hard to do that.
Yeah.
And I remember rocking her in the bed at like 3 o'clock in the morning. And she was a newborn and she was very unhappy and I couldn't figure out why.
Yeah.
And I remember honestly just praying, God, she is yours before she is mine. And in that moment I recognized, and so am I. I am yours. And you're going to get us through this, no matter what. I don't know what's wrong with this kid, and I don't know why she's crying, and I can't seem to make it better. But please, I know that you will. And so in my spiritual journey, the one thing that I have always recognized, even through those moments where I didn't always feel connected or I didn't really know exactly what I was supposed to be doing, God always showed up.
Yeah.
Even if I wasn't showing up the way I was supposed to. And I don't mean going to church,
No,
showing
I know
up.
what you mean.
I mean making life choices that probably were not what he would have had me to do at that time.
Even when you didn't have him as the priority and the guiding
Right.
force in your life.
He never left. He always showed up. And in those moments that I absolutely felt like I was at the bottom, he showed up. And so in that moment, I decided that I had to show up. That it was then very important that I be an active part of my own life. That I didn't just let life happen to me, if that makes sense.
It sounds like you moved from, I believe in God, to I'm going to actively try to follow him now.
Right.
Those are two different things, aren't they?
They are.
Yeah. This is more, you can keep God as a category when you're like, well, I believe in God,
Right.
but he becomes really personal when you're trying to follow and live by his values and principles. And
Absolutely.
it's wild how having your daughter triggered all of that.
Yes. Yes.
So over the course from that point on, I mean, even before, but you have, as you have been actively trying to follow, you have run into all kinds of challenges. You know,
Yes.
life isn't smooth, right?
Right.
That's true for anybody. Some of yours have been really unique, I think. But a lot of times when you run into those challenges, when you're trying to follow Jesus and you run into challenges, for some people it derails them.
Right.
For some people it discourages, or it's just disappointing to them. It seems to me, having watched you and heard your story, that those challenges ended up fueling your faith or your
Right.
trust in Jesus. Talk a little bit, however much you want to, about what some of those challenges have been, but how it's actually strengthened your relationship with Jesus.
Right. One thing that has happened over the course of time, I mentioned about going back to school or that
Yeah.
sort of thing. So I ended up kind of in a career long term that I thought would just be short term to pay for school. And I was a nail tech in town, and pretty much everyone I've met in Murray was through that job.
I was about to say, as many of the women watching know,
Yes.
yeah, that's where they know you
Yes,
from, right?
Exactly. And
Yeah.
I'll run into people and they're like, oh, hey, I think you did my nails for a wedding
Right.
or for my own wedding, you know.
Right.
And so it turned out that I actually was good at that job and I really loved it. And my clients were incredible. So those women throughout time, and I did work on a few men, but the women that I connected to were really my mentors. They didn't know it. They thought they were just coming for a manicure. And I didn't know it at the time, but different things that had happened through my life and being new to Murray and not really knowing a lot of people and then becoming a mom, and
Yeah.
they were able to give me lots of guidance and advice and things that I didn't even know I needed, to be honest.
But you were learning a lot through the conversations you would have while you were doing nails.
Yes, because I held hands and talked all day. It was great.
That's right.
It was a good time. So I was doing that, and I had been doing it for about 16 years, and I started getting really, really sick. And it was constant. Like, I thought I was just having sinus infections, but I didn't feel well. Like, literally would work all day, come home, and thank God for my husband. Thank you, William. And my mother, too. They were able to kind of take up the slack, because when I got home, I was done.
You were wiped out.
And I thought it was odd to be that done, that tired. Yeah. And it was even through that period of time where I stopped volunteering here, because I just couldn't do it. I could barely function. Yep. And, being a mom and a wife, and I'm a daughter, I helped take care of my mom. There were lots of things I was doing, but it still was very odd. And so I ended up finding out that I was allergic to everything that I was using on my clients.
Oh, wow.
I could not be in that environment any longer. And I went to several doctors to find out. And the last doctor that I saw, he said, "You are not going to get better unless you quit." And he was very blunt, and I didn't really like it, to be honest.
I'm sure.
Well, I was not thrilled.
That turns your whole world upside down, right?
Right, because really I had gotten to the point where I was finally, it was like, how the feeling I've arrived, like I had my own place, and I loved it. I loved where I worked.
You built this business to the point where it was going to thrive.
Yes. And I wanted to eventually retire, but I think I was 37, 38, and I was like,
too early.
What am I supposed to do now? Yeah. And so I went through the process, and someone does work in the salon now, but I got out of the business, and it was hard. At first, I wanted to look at it very optimistically, like, oh, great, I get to try something new. And everyone around me knew that was kind of a toxic positivity at the moment.
That wasn't going to last forever.
But they went with it, and they were like, okay, Peg, okay. And I did try something different, and it went okay, but it kind of slapped me in the face when I tried something new, how much I actually loved what I did. Because then I was learning something new people, and honestly, all of those relationships I had built, that was how I connected to them. I saw them every week or every 2 weeks. And those relationships changed because we were no longer in the same situation.
There was a lot of loss that you were going to have to grieve eventually, right?
Yes, and I was in complete denial about grieving.
Yeah.
Complete denial. Had no idea that would even affect me. And then, so I stopped in 2019, started something new, and then, as everyone knows, the world shut down in March of 2020 and 2021, which made it, March of 2020, and then it made it very difficult to learn a new job and even do that job.
Sure.
Because the job that I had taken at that time, you needed to meet people and talk to them and sell them things. Which
was a small problem.
Yes. So it also made me it gave me the time, whether I wanted it or not, I had to deal with those feelings.
Yeah.
And I fought God on that. I did not want to acknowledge, I didn't want to be that attached to what I did, but it wasn't who I was, but it was a huge part of my life. And once I recognized, okay, you're gonna have to deal with these feelings. You're going to have to work through this, and it's uncomfortable, but there again, God showed up. He showed up in ways I had no idea he would show up. And I also had to do something, is realize I am not in control, and I can trust him. That even though I have no idea how this is going to work out, I don't know what this looks like, I don't know what I'm going to do to make a living, I have no clue. God is going to step in because he always does. He had never failed me, even when I had walked away at times and didn't realize how much I needed him. He continued to show up.
So that's interesting, because as much as we don't want to be in those situations like the one you just described, you actually don't know for certain. You can't have confidence God's going to show up for you in those unless you're in those.
Right.
And you see him show up.
Right.
And it does deepen your faith, your trust in him to a different level. So let me ask you this. throughout all of this, you and William and the kids, you guys have been a part of this church. You have been surrounded by this community. We call it a movement of light. You've been surrounded by this movement and this community of people. Can you talk a little bit about how your involvement and engagement with this community, how that has helped you with your faith, with your life, how it's impacted your family as y'all have navigated through so much of this?
Absolutely. So one thing that it has helped us with, and William and I talk about this all the time, is there was actually a period of time where we weren't sure exactly our place. We weren't sure exactly what we were supposed to be doing.
Yep.
And there was a period of time that we only came, no offense, to serve. That is all we did.
Right.
And whether it be time constraints or because it was hard for me to commit when I didn't feel well and I didn't know how I would feel when I woke up. So I hated to be the volunteer that was like, sorry, not going to make it.
You had a little bit of energy, so you used it to serve, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And so there was a period of time where we would just show up to serve. And William and I have talked about that so many times because through serving, we got so much more out of that than I think probably the people we were serving.
Yeah, and probably more than sitting in a chair listening to somebody like me talk.
We do love to listen to
But
you.
there's something about being engaged and serving others, right?
Absolutely. And so in that moment, when that was all we had to give, we still said, we're still going to serve. We're still going to show up and we're going to serve. And every Sunday, there was something we would talk about after. And relationships were built there. And like the kids that I served with now, I've gotten to see them grow up and, learn more about Jesus and be baptized. And so all of that was continuing in that moment to show God's faithfulness.
Sure.
And to show that you do have a purpose, you are important, there's something, and sometimes I'm the kind of person that, as much as I don't always want to be needed, it feels good to know that I'm needed and I've done something.
And you're adding value,
and
right?
I'm adding value.
Yes, absolutely.
And as far as for our family, I remember that day bringing Mia the first time, and I've been able to watch her, and I've been able to see her become more engaged. And, she's 15 now, and life is different, and she still wants to be here. And may not always want to be with me because that's just kids.
Sure.
But she always wants to be here and she wants to serve. And Alexis, she's 7, so she's in a totally different environment. But every Sunday, I have to not tell her that I know what's going to happen because she's so excited to tell me.
Can't wait to tell you.
And so what it's done is in our own family, that connected us even more because we are in a place where we feel like we're connected and we're engaged. And we also know, she comes, it would be more convenient for her to go to 10:30 class, but she goes to 9 o'clock class because of her small group leader. She wants to be in there
she loves them so much.
With that particular person. And so along the course of time, we just continued to recognize that we still have to show up. I know I keep going back to that, but it's so important to be present in your own life.
Yes.
Because it is very easy to get lost and just react and not know really why you're doing what you're doing anyway. And for my kids, I wanted it to be something that was a choice that they wanted to do. Because if I force them to do it, I know how that goes later.
Right.
And sometimes they then come back around and sometimes they don't, and that's a choice they make. But I wanted it to be something that they would feel like they were a part of. Mom's not just going, Will or Dad's not just standing in the hallway, we're a part of this too. Because it's then their story.
You want them to own it, to feel like they owned it. That's right.
Because I have my story. William has his story. I want them to have their story, their journey of their own.
So what would you say to somebody who maybe they're in this situation you were just describing where it's just easier not to show up, but you don't always know what you're missing when you don't.
Right.
You can't always see it. You never see it immediately, what you're losing out on. Or maybe somebody's in a situation, where they're facing some challenges and they're trusting God's being tested. Just, Any last piece of advice for somebody who's facing what you've been through?
I would say that in those moments when you don't know what to do, and those happen a lot, where you don't know what to do or what exactly you're supposed to do even, put one foot forward and do the next right thing. Put one foot forward, just keep moving, because it's so easy to just stop and do absolutely nothing, whether it be fear or doubt or you're embarrassed, guilt or shame. There was periods of my life where I know that there was some guilt and shame that felt like I was separated from God. And what occurred is anytime I continued just to put one foot forward, I would recognize, I would be in a situation, I would be talking to someone that I would recognize, one, we've all got stuff. Every single person I've ever met has something. But if you continue to put that one foot forward and know that, one, you are absolutely not alone. You are not alone. And two, that when you show up, God is going to be right there. He is ready, willing, and waiting.
That is great advice. I think that's the best way to end this. Just do the next right thing and trust God's with you.
Absolutely.
Thanks for sharing your story. That's awesome.
Thanks for having me.
All right, we'll see you next time for episode 2 of Behind My Journey.